How do you get more podcast downloads without being on social media all day long? That is what we're talking about in today's episode of As It Relates to Podcasting with my guest, Megan Shields. You are going to love our conversation, but before we dive any further, I want to share with you that today's episode in this entire series is brought to you by my new membership called Podcast Success Vault. This monthly membership is your ultimate lifeline for starting, growing, and monetizing your show. I've heard from creators through the grapevine that this membership is something that is so needed and so exciting for creators because it's an all-in-one, one-stop shop for everything that you need when it comes to resources for your podcast. They also say that it fills a gap in the market that they haven't seen before. If you're feeling overwhelmed by the tech or you're struggling to grow your podcast or your audience, say goodbye to all of your confusion and all of your overwhelm and welcome in the confidence that you're going to get with this all access membership. The price for this membership is $27 a month, and this is the price that we're holding for the first 3 months of its existence. More details on all of that can be found at the link in the show notes below. But what's more important is that by joining Podcast Success Vault, you're going to unlock a comprehensive, massive list of resources, plug and play templates, for example, show notes templates, media kit templates, intro, outro, trailer scripts, pitch templates, brand deal templates, guest email templates, and all of the above. You're also going to get expert guidance from me and access to a community of podcasters just like you so that you can collaborate, you can mastermind, and you can bounce ideas off each other. My goal for this membership is that it empowers you to shine your light and to really share your message in a very impactful way so that you never, ever doubt yourself from getting up to that mic ever again. Whether you're just starting out in your podcasting journey or you've been around for a while, this membership has you covered and it has something for you. We have monthly plans and annual plans, and the best part about this is there are absolutely no commitments, so you can try it out for $27 a month. Check out the link in the show notes below for more information. Okay, now on to today's episode with Megan. Megan is a paid ads expert working primarily with podcasters. Today's episode is covering the first part of her Trifecta Strategy, which is focusing in on download growth. So how do we leverage paid ads to impact our downloads and grow them in a really significant way? I don't want to give too much away about our conversation in the intro, so I'm going to stop right here and we will get into our conversation with Megan right now. Welcome back, Megan, to As It Relates to Podcasting. Thank you so much for joining me today for part 2.
Yes, I'm super excited to dive a little deeper.
Me too. And we're actually getting into the nitty-gritty of your strategy when it comes to leveraging paid ads for your podcast growth, which I think is amazing. And today we're talking specifically about downloads and podcast growth. But I also want to just preface for my listener right now that we are going to be talking about email list and social media growth leveraging paid ads in the next 2 episodes. So if you're a podcaster and you are running your paid ads, or if you want to learn how to leverage an email list or what to do on social media and how this can work for you on social media, I definitely think that you should tune in and I think you should come back because I think it's really important to understand how all these components can work together and how these pieces can support your overall growth because they really are hand in hand. And I think that they're all important things that creators should be leveraging, right? You want to own your data at the end of the day. You want to own as much of it as you can. So anyways, I will stop talking, Megan, and we are going to dive into this download and podcast growth part of your strategy, which is the first piece of your trifecta.
Yes. Yeah. So the Trifecta ad strategy for our clients, and I think I mentioned this briefly on the initial episode, is download growth, email list growth, and social media growth, but all working together. Like you said, like all of these things go hand in hand. It's the bigger picture. It's the consistent growth, and over time can be super impactful.
I love that. I love that a lot. Okay, so we're going to break down the first one today. And this piece is, I think, probably most relevant to a creator because if you're listening to this and you have a podcast and you're like, yes, like immediately, this is something you can pick up immediately that is tangible, that you can implement into your growth strategy right away. So where do you begin when it comes to the first part of the trifecta? Like what is one of the first things that you do?
Yeah. So This particular piece is its own campaign. And what we do is we obviously are testing different ad creatives and testing different language. So it's really important to know who your ideal client is and what you're there to give to them. Because originally they need to interact with the ad first before they're going to go to your podcast. And so we have to stop their scroll and get them to click and take that action to go there. What I look for as far as the podcast itself, like I said, a lot of my clients are business owners. So I tend to choose a lot of solo episodes. One, because like guesting is great, but you want to be seen as the expert. And if you're paying for it, like then you're just paying for more eyes on whoever's on your podcast. So I think if you are going to use a guest component, you do have to be strategic about it. But I always look for solo episodes. We tend to look for the ones that, have a lot of download and engagement already. So that's the key to like really expediting ads working for you, is like finding out what's already working and use them for that.
Right.
And so that goes across anything, like not even just download growth, but anything in general in your business. And so I tend to look for really solid solo episodes that have a call to action. Got to have good show notes. Like you have to think about, when it comes to marketing and advertising as a whole, like you have to think about the journey of the person on the other end and how they're interacting and what they're doing through that process of clicking to listening or clicking to buying or clicking to opting in or whatever it is, and really thinking about that. So like, okay, if they're going to land on the episode, like having good show notes, explaining what it is, and then having a good call to action in the episode, but also in the show notes so they know, what to do to take that next step with you. So really making sure that like your podcast is ready for more of that traffic and being more intentional with, how you're titling your episodes, how you're doing your show notes to really maximize and optimize the more traffic that is going to be coming to it.
Are you also looking at your downloads on the back end too to sort of decide which episode might be a more targeted one? Like if it did well in all of your analytics, is this something that you typically look at when you're going to run it on its own?
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of my clients are on Buzzsprout. Apple Podcasts is pretty much the biggest platform that I see people that are downloading these episodes from. So we get in the back end and we take a look at that stuff. And that's how we can, decipher the results 30 days out and that kind of thing, from when the ad started to now 30 days of the ads running.
You know what's so interesting that I find, this is like a little bit of a side tangent, when it comes to Apple Podcasts specifically, every time I've gone in there to look at my stats for either podcast, I don't know what is wrong with my account, if anything. So I look on my hosting platform. I use Libsyn. I look on my hosting platform and it'll say like 96% of your downloads come from Apple. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. And then I'll go to Apple and it'll say 3 downloads. And I'm like, literally incorrect. Like I know for a fact, I'm like, this is wrong. And so I just like, I feel like I can't trust that data because I'm like, it's factually incorrect. Like I see the numbers. I'm like, that's literally impossible.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Like whoever ends up coming up with like super data tracking for podcast stuff is going to be
a millionaire
person, because
I hope it's me. No, I'm just kidding. It's not going to be
right.
me.
I know. I was like, man, I wish I had like that kind of brain to develop something like that.
Right?
But like, yeah. And that's the thing with data in general too, is like, it's good to have, but you have to think about it bigger picture too sometimes. Like if you even think about like how we interact when as a consumer, like when we see an ad, right? Like we might click on it and then we like open it in the browser and then we open it up on our computer and then like, we show it, open it up on our husband's phone because we want to show him, what it is that we looked at. And then, we leave the tabs open, we come back, we refresh, like, all of those are different data points. And it's, you're never going to know down to a T exactly what people are doing or how they, you're just not going to know
consuming.
all that
stuff.
Stuff.
You're never going to know.
Yeah, you're never going to know, but having trending indicators like will help, but there's definitely a balance of like seeing the data, but then also not getting like super intense with it. Because if you think about the different touch points and ways that we interact with stuff, it's like, it's crazy to try to think about how, to track all of that to a specific T.
1,000%. 1,000%. And, you know, when you're looking at all of this different data and you had mentioned earlier, you know, over the 30-day period, how long are you giving an episode? So, okay. So first of all, when it comes to podcast downloads, you are running ads to an episode specific, but are you also running an ad to the show overall
Yes, I've done both.
at
Yeah.
the same time?
Yep.
Okay. And then how long would you recommend having something run? Because here's the thing. My background is in PR, marketing, communications, that kind of stuff. More traditional, I want to say traditional marketing, but what I really mean is digital marketing, because now I feel like digital marketing is part of traditional marketing. That said, best practice for that type of marketing is to look at something over a 90-day period, 3-month period, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to give some time for the strategy to work, right? Especially when it comes to things like PR, you're never going to see results immediately from PR, right?
Right.
When you have anything on social media, you got to give yourself time. Even on TikTok, if you want to grow your account, they say 3 videos a day, every day for 30 days, right? So how long are you waiting to know if something is performing or not?
Yeah. Well, the interesting and cool thing about Facebook is that you will get data, especially with this strategy. So the crux of this strategy, right, was like cheap and no tech.
Yeah.
So like we're not even necessarily like my trifecta ad strategy, truthfully, doesn't have anything to do with the pixel. And so it's all done on the platform. And so you'll get the data literally immediately. Like we've seen an increase in downloads, listens, like subscribes, all of that within 2 weeks of running ads. And so, yeah, so it's one of those things like, yes, you definitely want to keep it running and you definitely want to be testing different things like over a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But we've been able to see almost immediate results when
That's
ads are
fast.
going. I generally don't touch an ad or do anything until at least a 5 or 7 day mark because
Okay.
you want to let it kind of get out there and learn and that sort of thing, where usually when you launch an ad the first couple days, like the data might not look fantastic, but it's learning, it's going to get better. So you don't want to bow out before things start moving.
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, we generally have a 30-day mark that we take a look at because most of my clients, I do a VIP day style where I build and launch this whole strategy in a day, and then I provide them support for 30 days. So I'm actually not managing it generally to the 60 and 90-day mark, the clients are, but we've gotten stellar results even inside that 30-day window.
That's amazing. Would you recommend going back to the same creative and updating that creative, or like are you duplicating the ad and the audience and testing it differently? And if that's too far deep into like the strategy, I totally respect that. Like that, I'm not trying to get too far deep in there, but I'm just curious because like, you know, I have this ad that I run for my podcast. It's a video. And I literally took my trailer for the show and I just run that as an ad, and it does decent. I put $5 a day behind it for, you know, infinity amount of time. And I'm just curious, like, would that be something that makes more sense to just duplicate and try something different with total different copy? You know what I mean? Because there's a difference between the A/B split test at the same time versus taking the creative and changing it completely within the same demographics and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to that stuff, like if it's working, then keep using it and then maybe try a variation and test that and see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, if it's working, you can keep using it.
Okay, cool. Love that. What else is important to know when it comes to this piece of the trifecta?
I think with the podcast piece, it's important to, you want to have a good amount of episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you only have a couple of episodes, it's generally better that if you're sending people to your podcast, that there's different types of content that they can interact with. But then just being effective in your episodes as a whole, having that call to action, the show notes, letting them know what that next step is to working with you or whatever it might be, and making sure that's, more solidified, because that will just help the overall success of the podcast ads in and of itself. So that and video, baby.
Yeah. Do you find that those ads perform best right now, video ads versus just a traditional post?
Last year it was kind of like, neck and neck a little bit, but
Yeah.
this year I've seen a significant increase in video being the dominating creative in pretty much every campaign I'm running.
I love that. And then when you guys are leveraging video for running ads, are you taking like, you know how people do like a video clip from their episode? Are you taking a video clip from that and like running that? Or do you recommend people do like a point of view video that's like, you know, something related to the show? Like my other podcast is called Happiness Happens. And it could be like, are you feeling really unhappy today? Like, you know what I mean? Like that type of
Mhm.
point of view. Or do you take a trailer or do you just take all three and test them all? Because people might not have budget to test all three.
Yep.
So if there's a recommendation there, that's cool.
Yeah, I've done both and we've seen good results with both. So, you know, talking like the type of stuff that you would put on Instagram. This is why it's great working with podcasters because they are
Yeah.
not short on content.
No.
um, which is fantastic. And so, yeah, like where you're talking in the mic, you know, like that, very organic, because that's the thing with video too. Like if people are listening right now, they might be like, oh, I don't want to hire like a video editor and it's got to be
Yeah.
like super high quality. And it does not. Like the more native it looks and organic it looks, the better it does. If it's really overproduced, I mean, if you think about how long Facebook's been around now, whatever, 30 years or whatever it is, like we are conditioned with like ads at this point. Like we know what ads look like. So when we see something that's like super polished and it's like drone shots and all this stuff, it's like we know it's an ad. So a lot of us just like swoop right on by.
Yeah.
But if it's organic, it looks native in the feed and someone's talking, you're like, oh, who's this? And then those tend to do super well. So if you're listening and you're like freaking out about the video thing, don't worry. What you probably have is good enough, especially if you're a podcaster. So yeah, both of those work. And even with a small budget, like let's say like the campaign I generally run for podcast growth, what we can do at, you know, $5 a day, and you can test about 3 creatives with that budget. So you can do a video where you're talking, you know, directly about your podcast. You could do one that's about an episode and you can kind of test it out. And we have seen both work.
I love that. That's really cool. And you know, some ads that I've seen a lot of recently are like B-roll videos with text on it. Like that's a lot of the ads that I'm like, oh, but it looks like it's part of it. I'm like, oh, I really like this. This feels relatable. And then you realize that they're selling you like a program or something and you're like, ah, cool. But I think that's a really cool strategy. I think that's a really good perspective to take.
Yeah, it's just repurposing a lot of organic stuff. And because, you know, that's part of, we'll talk about the social growth, but that's part of that too. And just helping people get their stuff out there more. So I think we're going to continue to see a lot more organic looking content being used as ads.
I love that. I love that. Megan, is there anything else that you would add on to the podcast growth side of your strategy? Any final tips that you want listeners to know? We covered quite a bit.
Yeah, we've covered quite a bit. So I think that's pretty much it.
I love it. Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I cannot wait. We're talking about the email list growth in our next episode, which I'm really excited about because I feel like this is a secret weapon for creators that not a lot of people leverage.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode on As It Relates to Podcasting. Check out the links in the show notes below. All of Megan's links are there, and be sure to grab her freebies so you don't miss out. My links to my freebies are also down there too, and be sure to connect with both of us on social media. Let us know if you have any questions about what we covered today, and until then, I will see you on the next one.